1987, a quiet suburb became the stage for one of the strangest family secrets ever recorded. A grandmother forbade her children and grandchildren from saying a single name. What followed proved she was right to be afraid. August 14, 1987. The house looked ordinary from the outside. 2 stories, white siding with dark shutters, a sloping yard that ended at a line of maple trees. Families like this lived in hundreds of small towns across America. There was nothing unusual about it, and yet what happened inside those walls was anything but ordinary. Neighbors would later recall the grandmother, Eleanor Whitaker, as a stern but respected figure. She kept her garden neat, never missed Sunday church, and raised her children with the kind of strict discipline that people at the time chalked up to the old ways. But among those who knew her best, her children and grandchildren, there was one unspoken rule: never say his name. That was Eleanor's command. No explanation, no exceptions. Establishing the family on that August evening, the Whitaker family gathered for dinner. The summer sun had just begun to set, casting a warm glow across the kitchen table. Julia Whitaker, 17, a restless teenager, sharp-witted, endlessly curious. Michael Whitaker, 42, Julia's father, a practical man who worked long hours at a local hardware store. Eleanor, 78, the grandmother, matriarch of the family, her authority unquestioned, or so it seemed. Dinner was roast chicken, mashed potatoes and corn on the cob. Ordinary food, ordinary conversation, until Julia asked a question that had hovered unspoken for years. "Grandma," she said, twirling her fork, "why don't we have any pictures of your brother? Dad says you had one, but I've never seen him." The room went silent. Eleanor's hand tightened around her fork. Slowly, she set it down and looked directly at Julia. Her voice was sharp, like the snap of a twig. "You will never say his name. Do you understand me?" "But I didn't even— Do you understand me?" Eleanor repeated. Michael sighed, rubbing his forehead. "Mom, come on. It's just a name. She's old enough to know family history." Eleanor turned to her son with a glare that silenced him. "This isn't history. This is survival." The rest of dinner passed in uneasy silence. Later that night, Julia sat in her bedroom. Posters of bands covered her walls. Her stereo sat in the corner with a stack of cassette tapes. She couldn't shake the feeling that her grandmother was hiding something. Why would a name, just a word, matter so much? As she leaned against the mirror above her dresser, she whispered under her breath, "What could it hurt?" She mouthed the forbidden name, the one she had overheard once when her father argued with her grandmother years ago. A single word. Nothing happened, at least not right away. But that night, Julia woke at 2:17 a.m. to the sound of footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, pacing down the upstairs hallway. Her bedroom door creaked, but didn't open. The footsteps stopped just outside. She held her breath, staring at the shadow beneath the door. Whoever or whatever stood there wasn't moving. Minutes ticked by. Then silence. Julia eventually fell back asleep, convincing herself it was her imagination. But by morning, she noticed something on the mirror above her dresser. A faint smudge, as though someone had pressed their palm flat against the glass. September 2nd, 1987 for the next few weeks. Small disturbances plagued the household. Lights flickered even when the bulbs were new. Doors slammed shut on calm days. Julia's cassette tapes occasionally played backward without explanation. One evening, the phone rang. Michael answered. "Hello?" Nothing but static. Then, beneath the hiss, a faint voice, a name whispered again and again. Michael slammed the receiver down, his face pale. "Who was it?" Julia asked. "No one," he muttered, but his shaking hands told another story. That same night, Eleanor stormed into Julia's room. "You spoke it, didn't you?" she demanded. Julia froze. I don't know what you mean." "Don't lie to me, child. You said his name, and now he knows." Julia's heart pounded. "Who knows?" Eleanor only whispered, "The one we banished." Michael refused to indulge Eleanor's fears. "You're scaring her with these old-world ghost stories," he snapped one morning. "There's no curse, no haunting. It's just a coincidence." But Eleanor stood her ground. "Coincidence doesn't scratch names into walls." Michael frowned. "What are you talking about?" She led him upstairs. Julia's bedroom wall bore fresh markings, jagged, uneven letters etched into the plaster. Letters that spelled out the forbidden name. Julia swore she hadn't done it. She had woken that morning to find it already there. Michael brushed it off as vandalism, a prank. But Eleanor's face was grave. "He's awake again," she whispered. "And he wants back in." October 12th, 1987, by mid-October, Julia was plagued with strange dreams. In them she stood in a long dark hallway where every door was locked. At the far end stood a figure, tall, motionless, his face hidden in shadow. She never got closer. But each night he seemed a little nearer. On October 12th she woke to find her window wide open, though she was certain she had locked it. On the windowsill lay a dead crow, its wings spread wide, black feathers scattering in the morning breeze. That same day, Eleanor gathered the family. "You must all listen to me," she said firmly. "Do not speak the name. Do not write it. Do not even think about it. He feeds on recognition, on remembrance. That is how he returns." Michael shook his head. "Mom, enough. This is madness." Eleanor's eyes burned with something between fury and terror. "Why would anyone invent something like this?" she asked. "You think I want this curse? You think I want to carry this shame?" That night, Julia couldn't sleep. She sat at her desk, notebook open, pencil in hand. She wasn't sure why she felt compelled to write it, but she began to scribble the forbidden name over and over. Her hand moved faster, pressing harder until the paper tore. She gasped, dropping the pencil. The room was deathly still. Then came the sound, the same heavy footsteps from before. Slow, deliberate. This time, they didn't stop at her door. The knob turned, and the door creaked open. What began as a family superstition was quickly becoming something no one in the Whitaker home could ignore. The more Julia defied her grandmother's warning, the stronger the disturbances became. And by the fall of 1987, what seemed like harmless superstition turned into something no one could explain. October 13th, 1987, Julia's breath caught in her throat as the bedroom door creaked open. A draft of cold air brushed across her skin, raising goosebumps. The hallway light was off. Beyond the door was only blackness. "Dad," she whispered, her voice trembling. No answer. For a moment, she thought she saw a shape standing in the darkness. Tall, still, watching. She blinked, and the shadow was gone. The door slowly swung shut, as though pushed by an unseen hand. Julia yanked the covers over her head and lay frozen until morning. October 13th, 1987, ate breakfast. Julia tried to explain what she had seen. It wasn't a dream, she insisted. The door opened by itself. "There was something there, I swear." Michael poured his coffee, shaking his head. "Doors open, Julia. Drafts happen." "You're working yourself up." "It wasn't a draft," Julia shot back. "I saw someone." Eleanor set her teacup down with a sharp clink. "He's here," she said quietly. "You invited him by saying his name." "That's how it always begins." Michael's patience snapped. "Mom, enough." You fill her head with these ghost stories, and now she's seeing things. That's all this is. But Eleanor didn't back down. "I've seen this before. I was a girl younger than Julia when I learned what happened. And if you keep pretending it's nothing, it will consume her." Julia looked between them, her chest tight. For the first time, she wondered if her grandmother's fear might be justified. Over the next 2 weeks, the disturbances escalated. Julia's alarm clock went off at 3 a.m. every night. Though she never said it, she found her belongings moved, her diary placed in the hallway, shoes stacked neatly by her door. On one occasion, her stereo turned on by itself, blasting static so loud it shook the walls. The family dog, Max, refused to enter her bedroom. He would whine at the doorway, tail tucked, then back away growling. Michael still insisted there had to be logical explanations. But his confidence began to waver when he himself experienced something. October 20th, 1987, it was late evening. Michael sat at the kitchen table, bills spread out before him. The house was quiet. Julia upstairs, Eleanor asleep in her room. The phone rang. He answered. At first it was only static. Then faintly a voice, a man's voice. "Michael." His stomach dropped. "Who is this?" "Michael," the voice repeated, clearer now. Then, "Say it." The line went dead. Michael sat frozen, the receiver still pressed to his ear. When he finally placed it back on the hook, he realized his hands were trembling. For the first time, he didn't tell Julia or Eleanor about the call. He didn't want to admit he was starting to believe. October 24th, 1987, Julia cornered her grandmother one afternoon while Michael was at work. "Tell me the truth," she demanded. "Who was he? Why can't we say his name?" Eleanor hesitated, then sighed heavily. She looked older in that moment, her face sagging with years of fear and memory. "He was my brother," she said. "But he wasn't like other boys. From the time he was small, he carried darkness in him. He hurt animals. He whispered things in the night. Our mother used to say he had the devil in him." Julia shivered. "What happened to him?" Eleanor's eyes darted toward the hallway, as if afraid someone might overhear. "They tried to banish him. The church, the neighbors, even the police. But he never truly left. His name binds him here. When you speak it, you invite him back," Julia whispered. "That's just superstition." Eleanor's gaze hardened. "Then tell me why your wall bears his name when you never wrote it. Tell me why your window opened itself. Tell me why you wake every night at the same hour. Why would anyone invent something like this?" Julia had no answer. By late October, Julia was unraveling. Dark circles hung beneath her eyes from lack of sleep. She jumped at every sound, every flicker of the lights. Her dreams worsened. The hallway was the same, doors locked tight, but the shadow figure was closer now. She could see the outline of his shoulders, the faint gleam of eyes that seemed to glow. On October 28th, she woke with deep scratches across her forearm. 3 long lines, as if clawed. Her bedsheets were shredded. Michael finally couldn't deny it. "We're calling someone," he said. "A priest, a pastor, whoever. I don't care what Mom says, we need help." But Eleanor shook her head violently. "No, priests won't help. He doesn't fear God. He fears only silence." "Only forgetting." Michael slammed his hand on the table. "Silence hasn't worked, Mom. He's already here." October 30th, 1987, desperate for answers, Julia went to the local library. She searched old newspaper archives, scanning for her great-uncle's name. She found it in a brittle paper dated 1923. The headline read, "Local man accused of occult rituals, banished from town." Her great-uncle's name appeared again and again, tied to rumors of animal sacrifice, strange gatherings in the woods, and missing children no one could prove he had taken. Julia tracked down a retired historian, Mr. Callahan, who had contributed to the article decades earlier. "I remember him," Callahan said, his voice gravelly with age. "Tall boy, strange eyes. Folks said he never died right. His body was gone before they could bury him. Some believed saying his name kept him near. I didn't buy it back then. But now," he trailed off, shaking his head. "Now I wonder if your grandmother was right all along." Julia left shaken, clutching the photocopied article in her hands. October 31st, 1987, Halloween night. Julia sat in her room, the article spread across her desk. The house was dark and quiet. Outside, distant laughter of trick-or-treaters echoed through the neighborhood. Suddenly, her cassette player clicked on. The tape rolled backward, emitting a distorted voice, not static this time. A word, his name, spoken clearly, over and over. Julia backed into the corner of her room, hands over her ears. "Stop it! Leave me alone!" The room grew icy cold. Her breath came out in white puffs. The mirror above her dresser fogged over, and words appeared in the condensation. "Say it." Julia screamed. Michael and Eleanor burst into the room moments later. The cassette player stopped. The mirror cleared, but on Julia's desk, the article from 1923 was gone. In its place lay a single sheet of paper, her great-uncle's name scrawled across it in jagged black ink. The ink was still wet. By November of 1987, the Whitaker family was no longer dealing with simple disturbances. What had started as whispers and shadows now manifested in ways none of them could deny. But as Julia searched for answers, she uncovered a secret her grandmother had kept buried for over 60 years, a secret hidden not in memory, but in the basement. November 1st, 1987, Julia sat on her bed, trembling, staring at the sheet of paper with the name scrawled across it. The ink hadn't smudged, as if written by an invisible hand. Michael grabbed the page, his face pale. "How did this get here?" I don't know," Julia stammered. The article was right there. And then, this. Eleanor crossed herself, whispering under her breath. Then, louder, "He's closer now. He wants acknowledgement. He wants to be spoken to." Michael slammed the paper down. "No, this ends now." But even as he said it, the overhead light flickered. buzzing angrily before going dark. In the silence, a faint scratching noise came from beneath the floorboards, like fingernails dragging across wood. November 2nd, 1987. The following morning, Eleanor was uncharacteristically quiet. She sat at the kitchen table, her hands clutching a small rosary so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Grandma," Julia pressed, "you know more than you're telling us. That wasn't just a name on that paper. You've hidden something. I can feel it." Eleanor's eyes brimmed with tears. "I thought I could protect you. I thought if I never spoke of it again, it would die with me." "Protect us from what?" Julia asked. Eleanor's voice dropped to a whisper. "The chest." Michael leaned forward. "What chest?" Eleanor shook her head, refusing to elaborate. But later that evening, Julia caught her grandmother muttering to herself, "It should have stayed buried. It should never have been brought into this house." November 3rd, 1987, driven by curiosity and fear, Julia ventured into the basement alone. The air was heavy with dust and mildew, the single dangling bulb casting long shadows against the stone walls. She searched behind boxes of old clothes, rusted tools, and stacks of forgotten holiday decorations. And then she saw it, a wooden chest, low to the ground, reinforced with iron bands. Its surface was carved with strange markings, worn almost smooth with age. The lock was heavy, rusted, but still intact. Julia crouched, brushing her fingers over the lid. She felt a strange pulse beneath her palm, as though the wood itself was alive. Her stomach turned. She backed away, heart pounding. That night, she dreamed of the chest opening on its own, something crawling out of it, whispering her name in a voice she recognized but could not place. November 5th, 1987, Michael discovered Julia in the basement staring at the chest. "You shouldn't be down here," he snapped, pulling her back. "What is it, Dad?" Julia demanded. "Why won't Grandma tell us?" Michael hesitated, then rubbed his forehead. "I remember when I was a boy. She used to warn me not to touch that chest. She said it carried our family's curse. I thought it was just a story to keep me from snooping." "So you knew?" Julia accused. "I forgot about it," Michael said bitterly. "Or maybe I forced myself to forget. I never saw it move, never saw it open. But I always felt it, watching." Eleanor's voice echoed from the stairs. "You must never open it. Do you understand? If the chest is opened, you will give him power. You will give him flesh again." November 7th, 1987. The scratching sounds returned, louder this time. Julia woke in the middle of the night to find the basement door at the end of the hallway wide open. From below came the unmistakable sound of wood groaning. As though something inside the chest was shifting, she crept closer, trembling, peering down the dark stairwell. "Julia." The voice drifted up from the basement. Male. Familiar. "Julia, come closer." Her legs nearly gave out. She backed away, slamming the basement door shut, but when she turned, she saw the name written across the wall in dripping black letters. The same name. November 9th, 1987, desperate. Julia returned to Mr. Callahan, the retired historian. She brought up the chest. Callahan froze when she mentioned it. "So it still exists? What do you mean?" Julia pressed. "The chest was said to be built in 1923 after your great-uncle vanished. Folks believed his spirit couldn't move on because his body was never recovered. The chest was meant to bind him, a vessel. They used wood from the gallows of the old courthouse, nails from a church door, things meant to hold evil." Julia's skin crawled. "So he's inside it?" Callahan's voice shook. "If you open that chest, you won't just see him. You'll release him." November 12th, 1987. Despite the warnings, Julia felt drawn to the chest. At night, she heard whispers calling her name, urging her closer. "Just one look, Julia. One look and you'll understand." She began to dream of her great-uncle more vividly. He appeared not as a shadow now, but as a gaunt man with hollow cheeks and piercing eyes. He reached out to her, begging. "They lied to you," he whispered in the dream. "I'm not the monster. They are. Open it, and I'll show you the truth." Julia woke in tears, torn between fear and curiosity. November 15th, 1987. The family could no longer ignore the events. Plates flew from cabinets. Doors slammed on their own. Eleanor's rosary snapped in her hands as if pulled apart by invisible force. Michael finally admitted, "We can't live like this. We need to do something." Eleanor shook her head. "There's nothing we can do except destroy the chest." But even that carries risk. Fire can release him, so can breaking the lock. It must be buried deeper. Forever, Julia whispered. What if he's not what you think? What if he's trapped unfairly? Eleanor's face twisted in horror. Don't you dare believe his lies. November 18th, 1987, that night. Julia stood at the basement door, staring down at the darkness below. The whispers were louder than ever. Julia, you're the only one who can save me. Open it. I'll protect you. I'll give you answers. Her hand rested on the doorknob. She felt the pull, stronger than fear, stronger than reason. She turned the knob. By late November of 1987, the Whitaker family was no longer safe in their own home. The chest in the basement, long hidden, long ignored, drew Julia closer each night. And when she finally gave in, what emerged was something her grandmother had feared all her life. November 20th, 1987, Julia's hand hovered over the chest's rusted lock. Her breath fogged in the cold basement air. Behind her, Eleanor's words still echoed. If you open that chest, you'll kill us all. Julia turned. Then tell me the truth, Grandma. Who is he? Eleanor stood at the bottom of the stairs, her frail frame trembling. My brother, she whispered. Your great-uncle Thomas. He was lost to us, but not dead. Not in the way people think, Michael. Stepped down behind her. Mother, stop! His voice shook. Julia doesn't need to know this, but Julia's heart was pounding too hard to stop. Yes, I do. Eleanor's face crumpled. Thomas was a cruel boy. He hurt animals. He lied. He took things from people. When he was 15, something came over him. He started speaking in voices that weren't his own. The priests called it possession. My parents, your great-grandparents, locked him away. They built that chest to hold him after he disappeared. He wasn't buried, Julia. He was bound. Julia felt sick. Bound here? Eleanor nodded. And every time his name is spoken, the binding weakens. November 21st, 1987. The next day, Julia returned to the basement alone. She stared at the chest. Her grandmother's story replayed in her head. Bound, possession, disappearance. But why had the whispers sounded so human, so desperate? She grabbed a hammer from the tool bench and pressed it against the lock. The chest vibrated faintly beneath her hands, as though responding to her touch. Julia. The voice came again, soft, pleading. Please, they lied to you. They trapped me. I'm your blood. I need you. Her hand trembled. She almost brought the hammer down. But before she could, the basement light flickered and went out completely, plunging her into darkness. From the shadows came the sound of chains rattling. She dropped the hammer and fled upstairs. November 23rd, 1987, Julia returned to Callahan, the retired historian. I found the chest, she admitted. I think he's in there. Callahan paled. You have to stay away from it. That chest was crafted as a prison, not a coffin. If you open it, you'll undo generations of protection. But what if he's innocent? Julia argued. What if he was just misunderstood? Callahan leaned forward. His voice was sharp, unyielding. Listen to me. People died because of your great-uncle. Neighbors vanished. Livestock drained of blood. He was not misunderstood. He was feared. Why do you think your grandmother never spoke his name? Why do you think even the church refused to bury him? Julia's hand shook as she rose from her chair. I don't believe you. But as she stormed out, Callahan called after her. If you open that chest, child, you won't be saving him. You'll be serving him. November 25th, 1987. The night before Thanksgiving, the Whitakers gathered in the living room. The atmosphere was thick with dread. We can't live like this, Michael said, pacing. The house isn't safe anymore. We need to leave. Eleanor slammed her hand against the table. If you leave the chest behind, it will draw others. It must stay sealed. Always. Julia's voice broke the silence. What if sealing it isn't enough anymore? What if we have to end it? Eleanor's face went pale. End it? Julia looked toward the basement door. By opening it. By confronting him. Eleanor shrieked. No! That's exactly what he wants. The room erupted in shouting. Michael demanded reason. Eleanor begged for silence. Julia sat frozen, staring at the basement door. The whispers curling around her ears. November 27th, 1987, that night. Julia awoke to the sound of her window creaking open. She bolted upright and saw a figure at the edge of her bed. Tall, thin, shadow-like. It leaned close, its breath icy against her ear. You're the only one who can free me, Julia screamed. Michael burst in seconds later, flipping on the light. But the shadow was gone. Only the window, wide open, let in the freezing night air. November 28th, 1987, the family couldn't sleep. The house shook at odd hours. Photographs flew off the walls. At one point, Julia swore she saw her great-uncle's reflection standing behind her in the bathroom mirror, even though no one was there when she turned. Finally, Michael snapped. "Enough, we will destroy it tonight," Eleanor sobbed. "No, fire will release him. You'll doom us all." But Julia said nothing. She had already made up her mind. November 29th, 1987 at midnight. Julia crept down to the basement. The chest seemed to glow faintly in the dark. She raised the hammer again, her breath quick and shallow. "Julia!" the voice cooed. "You're so close." Just one strike, tears filled her eyes. She brought the hammer down hard. The lock shattered. The chest groaned as though breathing for the first time in decades. The lid began to rise on its own. Cold air rushed out, extinguishing the basement bulb in an instant, and then a hand, thin, gray, claw-like. It gripped the edge of the chest and pulled. Julia screamed as the lid flew open. Something climbed out. When the chest finally opened in November of 1987, what emerged was not a ghost, but something far worse. A presence bound by blood, resentment, and hunger. The Whitaker family soon learned that their grandmother's silence wasn't just about superstition. It was about survival. November 30th, 1987. The figure loomed at the bottom of the basement stairs, its gaunt face illuminated by the flicker of the single bulb that had miraculously returned to life. Julia's breath caught in her throat. "Thomas." The thing smiled wider, showing teeth too sharp, too many. "You freed me?" Eleanor crawled forward, tears streaking her face. "Thomas, please, go back. You don't belong here." His voice was cold, deep, vibrating against the walls. "I belong more than you ever did, sister. You locked me away. You erased me. But blood remembers." Michael stepped in front of Julia. "Stay away from her." Thomas tilted his head, studying Michael. Then, almost tenderly, "You have her eyes." "My sister's boy," Julia whispered. "What are you?" Thomas turned to her, grinning. "Family." December 1st, 1987. The following morning, the Whitakers woke to a house that no longer felt theirs. The air smelled of iron and rot. Every mirror in the house cracked overnight. The radio turned itself on, whispering distorted hymns at dawn. At breakfast, Julia found claw marks gouged into the wooden table. Words carved deeply. "He lives here now." Eleanor refused to eat. She sat in silence, her hands trembling. Michael slammed his fist against the counter. "We're calling a priest. An exorcist. Somebody." Eleanor shook her head violently. "No, don't you understand? He doesn't want a house. He wants us. He wants blood," Julia whispered. "Then why does he call me?" No one answered. December 3rd, 1987. That night, Julia confronted her grandmother in the kitchen. "Tell me everything." "No more secrets." Eleanor's shoulders sagged. She looked older than ever. "Thomas wasn't born cursed. He was made that way." Julia frowned. "What do you mean?" Eleanor's voice cracked. "Our father, your great-grandfather, made a bargain. During the Depression, when food was scarce, he turned to things no church would bless. He promised his firstborn son to a spirit in exchange for wealth and survival. The family lived, but Thomas was taken. He became the vessel, half human, half something else." Julia's stomach lurched. "And you knew?" "I was a child," Eleanor whispered. "But when Thomas began to change, they looked to me to silence him. I was the one who spoke the right. I was the one who sealed the chest." Julia's voice shook. "So this is your fault?" Eleanor's eyes brimmed with tears. "I thought I was saving everyone." But the binding was never permanent. That's why his name had to vanish. Every time it was spoken, it gave him breath again. December 5th, 1987, Julia dreamed again. In the dream, Thomas sat at the edge of her bed, his black eyes softer now. Almost human. "They lied to you, Julia," he whispered. "Your grandmother cursed me. She bound me to darkness when I was just a boy. You are my blood. You can free me completely." "All I need is your name." Julia jolted awake, sweat soaking her sheets. At the foot of her bed was a single word scratched into the wood. "Say it." December 7th, 1987. Julia begged Michael to take her back to Callahan. The historian opened his door reluctantly, his face grim. "You opened it," he said flatly. Julia nodded. Callahan sighed heavily. "Then it's already too late. The bindings are broken. The only chance now is to end the bloodline connection. Michael frowned. What does that mean? Callahan looked directly at Julia. He's tethered to her. The only way to banish him is through sacrifice. Either she offers herself, or he takes her. Michael exploded. No, absolutely not. But Julia just stared at the floor, silent. December 9th, 1987. The house shook violently at 2:00 a.m., bookshelves toppled. Windows shattered inward. The family rushed to the living room, only to find Thomas standing by the fireplace, his smile wide, his frame towering. He whispered Julia's name, each syllable echoing through the walls. Michael grabbed a fireplace poker and swung. It passed through Thomas like smoke. Eleanor clutched her rosary, chanting prayers. Thomas laughed, the sound metallic and cruel. Still praying, sister? Still clutching your beads while I rotted in wooden chains? He reached out, and Eleanor was hurled across the room by unseen force, her frail body slamming against the wall. Stop! Julia screamed. Stop hurting them! Thomas turned. His black eyes glistened. Then come to me. Say my name, Julia. Say it and I'll let them live. Her lips parted. She nearly spoke it, but Michael grabbed her, pulling her back. Don't! December 11th, 1987. Eleanor, bruised but alive, whispered a desperate plan. There's one chance left. The chest can still bind him if we trap him again, but it requires blood willingly given. Michael frowned. Whose blood? Eleanor's eyes met Julia's. Julia felt her stomach drop. December 12th, 1987, that night. They dragged the chest back into the center of the basement. Eleanor lit candles, muttering the old rites she swore she'd never repeat. Thomas appeared in the corner, his smile cruel. Again with the games, sister? Haven't you learned? Julia stepped forward, a knife in her trembling hand. She pricked her palm, letting blood drip onto the chest. The carvings glowed faintly. The air grew colder. Thomas hissed, his form flickering like smoke. It won't hold, he snarled. Not unless you give more. The ground shook violently. The basement walls cracked. Michael pulled Julia back. It's not working. Eleanor screamed. More blood! It needs more! By December of 1987, the Whitakers stood at the edge of something ancient and unspeakable. Thomas wasn't merely a ghost. He was the shadow of a bargain, the remnant of blood promised long ago. Now the last of the bloodline would decide if the curse ended or lived forever. December 12th, 1987. The chest glowed in the basement, its carvings burning red against the stone floor. Julia's blood sizzled where it touched the wood. The air was thick, hard to breathe. Eleanor clutched her rosary tighter, shouting the binding prayer through cracked lips. In the name of... Thomas roared, drowning her out. His form swelled, the ceiling trembling as plaster rained down. You will not silence me again. Julia was trapped between them, her grandmother's desperate hand on her right, Thomas's icy grip on her left. Julia! Michael shouted. Drop the knife! But Julia couldn't move. The knife trembled in her hand, as though the choice belonged to more than just her. Thomas leaned close, his whisper sliding into her skull. One cut deeper. Give me your name, and I'll never need another. You'll never lose me. We'll be whole, Eleanor screamed. Don't listen. He'll devour you, just like he devoured our father, our mother, everyone who loved him. Julia's scream broke through the chaos. Stop! And for one heartbeat, the house went silent. December 13th, 1987. When Julia awoke, she was lying on the basement floor. The candles had burned out. The chest no longer glowed. Eleanor sat slumped against the wall, barely conscious. Michael crouched over her, eyes wet with panic, but Thomas was still there, his shadowy frame outlined in the far corner, watching. You don't need them, he whispered to Julia. You've seen what they are, liars, cowards. She cursed me. Julia, she cursed us both. Julia's voice was hoarse. What do you want from me? His smile widened. Only your promise. Say you are mine, and I will let them live. Say it, and the hunger ends. Eleanor forced herself upright. Don't, Julia, he doesn't stop. He never stops. Thomas's black eyes softened. Why trust her? She bound her own brother in chains. She'll do the same to you. I would never. Julia's heart pounded. Both voices clawed at her, each word cutting her in half. December 15th, 1987, 2 days passed in suffocating tension. The house itself seemed alive now, walls groaning, whispers leaking through vents, shadows crawling where no light fell. At night, Julia would wake to find her door unlocked no matter how many times Michael bolted it. Sometimes she'd feel the cold press of fingers brushing her hair. One evening she found Eleanor burning old photographs in the fireplace. Images of Thomas as a boy, his smile eerily familiar. "You can't erase him," Julia whispered. Eleanor didn't look up. "That's what I've been trying to do my whole life." Michael burst in then, his face pale. "The chest, it's upstairs." They ran to the living room. There, in the center of the rug, sat the chest, open, empty. The carving still burned. December 16th, 1987, that night. Thomas came for them. The walls bled with black ooze. The house screamed like a living thing. Thomas stepped out of the shadows, taller than ever, his grin stretching impossibly wide. "It's time." Michael shoved Julia behind him. "You'll take her over my dead body." Thomas's head tilted. Gladly, he flicked his hand, and Michael was slammed against the ceiling, blood pouring from his mouth as his body crumpled to the floor. Julia screamed. "No!" Thomas turned to her, gentle once more. "I don't want him. I only want you." Eleanor dragged herself forward, clutching the rosary so tightly the beads cut her skin. "Take me instead." "Leave her be. She's innocent." Thomas's smile curdled into hatred. "You, after what you did to me? You don't get redemption." But Julia stepped forward, her voice steady now. "Then take me." Eleanor's scream split the air. "No!" Julia raised the knife again, her own blood dripping onto the glowing chest. Thomas reached for her, but instead of cutting herself deeper, Julia did something none of them expected. She turned the knife inward, toward the chest. With a primal scream, she carved her name into the wood. Julia. The carvings lit like fire. The chest roared as if alive. Thomas howled, his body collapsing into black smoke, clawing at the air. "No, you were mine! You were mine!" The smoke was sucked violently into the chest, dragging his scream with it. Then, silence. The chest slammed shut on its own. Julia collapsed, the knife clattering to the floor. December 20th, 1987. The days after were a blur. Michael survived, though his ribs were shattered. Eleanor, pale and frail, never fully recovered from the ordeal. And Julia? She hadn't spoken a word since that night. The chest remained sealed in the basement. But across the lid, her name was still carved, glowing faintly in the dark. Eleanor knew the truth. Thomas wasn't gone. He had only been transferred. Bound not just to the chest, but now to Julia herself. In the end, the forbidden name was never just Thomas. It became Julia too. For every curse sealed away demands a keeper, and every silence comes at a price. Eleanor died 2 years later, still clutching her rosary, her lips sealed about her brother. Michael moved far from the Whitaker house, vowing never to return. And Julia? Neighbors say she still lives there, alone, unaging. Some nights from the basement window, a shadow can be seen watching, waiting. The Whitakers tried to erase Thomas from memory. But some names, once spoken, can never be silenced again. The end.